Where in the world are you watching this from? Is it a peaceful little town, or the middle of a bustling city? Drop a comment below, I'd love to know where you're listening to this story from. And while you're typing a few words, I have an interesting question for you. If you dedicated your whole life to a company, only to be fired in a matter of minutes, what would you do? Today, I'm going to share with you a true story about someone who was cruelly let go by the son of their old boss, but that young man had no idea he was making the biggest mistake of his life. Take a guess, how do you think this story ends? Who do you think comes out on top? Leave your predictions in the comments, and let's begin the story. I remember clearly my first day working there. The morning was still misty, and my old shoes soaked up the cold water as I walked across the gravel parking lot. I stepped into the office, so nervous I couldn't even recall what I'd said during the interview. But Mr. Rick, the boss, wasn't like any recruiter I had ever met. He didn't look at me like a resume. He looked at me like a person. "You're a single mother?" he asked, his voice free of judgment. I nodded. He simply smiled and gently said, "Then I bet you already know what hard work is." And just like that, I was hired. At first, I worked in the archives, organizing files, typing documents, answering phones. The office was tiny, just big enough for 3 desks, one giant, clunky printer, and a coffee machine that whirred and groaned every time someone used it. But in that small room, I felt valued. Everyone did their part, no one above the other. Whenever I made mistakes, instead of scolding me, Mr. Rick would say, "It's all right, Ellie. We learn from those." No one had ever believed in me the way Mr. Rick did. When I was given the responsibility of managing contracts, I thought I'd mess it up. But he said, "I know you can do this. Take your time, I'll guide you." And true to his word, he was always there, not just to show me the work, but to teach me how to be a guide myself. Over the years, I moved through many roles. Sometimes I was a secretary, sometimes a supervisor, and there were times I handled all 3 jobs at once. I never said no. I knew wherever I was needed, I would go. And somehow, every time I accomplished something, Mr. Rick was the first to pat me on the shoulder and say, "I'm proud of you, Ellie." To be honest, I never saw him as just a boss. He felt more like an uncle, a friend, sometimes even like the father I never had. He remembered my birthday, asked how my son was doing when he was sick, and sent handwritten Christmas cards. And he didn't just do that for me. He treated everyone that way. To him, people always came before profit. I remember one harsh winter when the company hit tough times. Some employees had to be furloughed. Mr. Rick held a meeting, didn't read a long formal statement, just simply said, "I'm sorry. I'll do everything I can to bring you back as soon as possible." And he kept his promise. 3 months later, most of them were back. I've never seen anyone lead with so much compassion. And because of the way he lived, I learned to become someone I could be proud of. I started looking out for younger coworkers, teaching them how to cope in a crisis, helping them take time off when their families needed them. I wanted to pass on what Mr. Rick had given me, not just skills, but a way of being kind in an increasingly cold world. The company grew. From that shoebox-sized office, we moved into a real building, with a receptionist, elevators, meeting rooms with projectors, and air conditioning that hummed softly. But to me, the thing that changed the least was the most important: the heart of the company remained. We were still a family. And I was still Ellie, the woman who made coffee for everyone each morning, who remembered the names of every coworker's child, who stayed late to wipe down the counter after everyone had gone home. I thought I would work there until the day I retired. I pictured that day, everyone gathered, cutting cake, hugging, sharing old stories. I would walk out the door one last time with soft shoes, a quiet smile, and a peaceful heart. Then one morning, Mr. Rick called me into his office. He was older than before, but his eyes were just as kind as the day we first met. He said, "Ellie, I think it's time for me to rest. My son will be taking over next week." I smiled and nodded gently. I didn't say much, just thanked him for everything. In my heart, though there was a flicker of worry, I thought, if he's Mr. Rick's son, he must be a good person too. I never imagined that a week later, I would no longer be allowed to step foot in that room again. The company I dedicated my whole life to wasn't some massive corporation with a glowing logo on a skyscraper. It started as a small workshop in an industrial park on the south side of town, the kind of place where you could hear the printers whirring all day and old country music playing from an AM radio in the break room. But despite its modesty, that place had something most big companies have long lost: humanity. From the moment I stepped in, everything revolved around people, not payroll, not spreadsheets. And the man at the center of it all, Mr. Rick, was the one who breathed life into that culture. He didn't like calling himself a CEO. His business card simply said, Rick J. Thomason, owner. No fancy title, no glass-walled private office. He sat with us, had lunch with us, and walked around the shop floor several times a day just to ask, "You doing all right, Ellie?" Mr. Rick was the kind of person who seemed to be everywhere, but never made you feel watched. He was present, not overbearing. I remember once messing up the payroll sheet, causing an employee to be short nearly $100. I was on the verge of tears from shame. He simply placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "We're not machines, Ellie. Just fix it." Then he pulled out his own wallet and covered the missing amount before accounting had a chance to process it. That wasn't an exception, that was how Mr. Rick lived every day. Every holiday, he personally signed greeting cards for each employee. No templates, no mass printing. He wrote each name by hand, remembered wedding anniversaries, children's names, even who just got a new dog. For people like me, who didn't grow up with a complete family, that meant more than any bonus. As the years went on, the company grew. We opened new branches, hired more people, upgraded to modern systems. But Mr. Rick kept the old things that mattered, like the open-door policy. Anyone, from janitors to department heads, could knock on his door and sit down for a talk. I didn't just witness that growth, I was part of it. I coordinated our first big client projects. I wrote the first contracts, sometimes late into the night, with my son asleep on the couch beside me because his mom was working. I never complained. To me, every step forward the company took was a step forward in my own life. When my son reached high school, he said, "Mom, I think you love that company as much as you love me." I laughed and replied, "No, I love you more. But that company helped me raise you." And Mr. Rick knew that. He noticed the quiet sacrifices. After a tough project, he once called me into his office and said, "I can't pay you enough for everything you've given. But I see it, Ellie. I see it all." Sometimes, that's all we need, to be seen. Not with money, but with understanding. Over time, I became an unofficial mentor to the newer employees. They called me the soul keeper of the company. I wasn't the best with tech or the sharpest in presentations, but I knew how everything worked, and more importantly, I understood people. Once, during a strategic meeting, someone suggested laying off the archive department because it wasn't efficient anymore. I spoke up, not out of emotion, but because I knew one of the young women there was caring for a sick mother. And I knew this company wasn't built on productivity, it was built on loyalty. Mr. Rick listened to me. He always listened, even when he didn't agree, he listened. There wasn't much that needed to be said between us. That's what decades of understanding brings. One time, he said, "If I'm the heart of this company, then you're the hands." I replied, "No, I'm just the one who keeps it warm." He laughed out loud, and from that Christmas on, he gave me a pair of wool gloves every year, to keep that heart from getting cold. The company wasn't perfect. We had disagreements, mistakes, tough quarters that made everyone worry. But in all those times, Mr. Rick never asked, "Who's to blame?" He always asked, "How do we get through this together?" And we always did. To me, it wasn't just a job. It was where I grew up, where I found my self-worth, where I watched young people become grown-ups, a place I called my second home. Years later, I was invited to speak at an orientation for new hires. I said, "This company isn't perfect. But if you work with your whole heart, it'll be a place you'll be proud to tell your grandchildren about one day. I believed that, right up to the very last moment I stood in that office. Before everything changed. I met him for the first time on a Monday morning, unannounced. Mr. Rick's office door was slightly ajar, and I heard unfamiliar footsteps, quick, firm, a bit rushed. As I walked in to deliver some documents for signature, Mr. Rick looked up and smiled. "Ellie, this is Thomas, my son. He'll be taking over the company." The young man reached out to shake my hand, his smile polite but not warm. His eyes were not like his father's. They didn't seek connection, they scanned me like a barcode reader, just to assess who I was, what I did, and how useful I might be to the new system he was already constructing in his mind. "Nice to meet you, Ellie," he said, his voice slightly cold and a bit too fast. I simply smiled and nodded, saying little. I'd met many young people entering this company full of enthusiasm, but I'd never seen anyone arrive looking more eager to cut away the old than to understand it. Thomas was not like his father. He didn't make coffee for anyone in the morning. He didn't greet people by name. Instead, he walked straight into his office, closed the door, and conducted all communication by email, even with someone sitting just 2 desks away. In the very first week, he changed our internal management software. Everyone was confused. I watched longtime colleagues, some of them had worked here for nearly 20 years, struggle with an unfriendly new interface. We received no training, only a long email with instructions. When a young employee asked if we could revert to the old system, Thomas simply replied, "We can't live in the past forever." I don't hate innovation. But I believe that before you change something, you should understand why it exists in the first place. It's like walking into an old house, you don't knock down a wall right away. You ask, who built this wall? And why? Thomas didn't ask. He acted. Team meetings were now replaced by memos sent through the system. No more gathering around a whiteboard to brainstorm. No more end-of-day laughter when someone shared a funny story about their kid spilling milk into a filing cabinet. Instead, there was the cold silence of nods exchanged through screens. I started seeing people leave. Not with noise. But with gradually empty desks, rushed farewell emails, and apologetic glances as people boxed up their belongings. Some left because they no longer felt appreciated. Others were let go for being out of alignment with the new direction. I tried to stay optimistic. I thought maybe Thomas just needed time. Everyone goes through a learning curve. Maybe he would change once he understood the people here better. I had seen many young people grow through experience, not theory. But with each passing day, I began to realize, he didn't want to learn from us. Thomas didn't see the company as a legacy to preserve, he saw it as an investment to reshape. To him, the payroll was just a number to cut down, not a list of loyal people. To him, gatherings were a waste of time, and the framed memories on the hallway wall were unprofessional. Even the black and white photo of Mr. Rick standing beside the original team, the one that had hung there since my first day, was taken down and replaced with a growth forecast chart. I didn't say anything. But deep inside, I felt something beginning to crack, not anything dramatic or loud. Just a quiet fracture, running down the wall that had stood strong for so many years. I wasn't angry. I didn't hate Thomas. I was just sad, because I recognized the feeling. The feeling of standing in your own home, and slowly watching everything familiar be replaced, until you start to feel unnecessary. I told a friend from the same department, "It feels like I'm reliving my first days here, only this time, I'm the one no one's guiding." She looked at me and said nothing. But in her eyes, I saw the same thing, uncertainty. Some changes don't need sound to make you realize, your time might be nearing its end. Not because you're no longer capable. But because the values you stand for, are no longer being seen. I don't know when I started packing up my desk a few minutes earlier each day. Or when I stopped making coffee for the whole office. I just know that every morning I walked in, I could hear the sound of my heels echoing louder down the hallway. As if I were walking closer to a door that was quietly closing. It was a Wednesday, unusually warm for October. I arrived earlier than usual, carrying a box of homemade apple pie, an old habit of mine whenever there was a birthday in the office. I placed the box on the break room table, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, then returned to my desk and turned on my computer, just like every other day. A little after 9 a.m., I received a short email, only one line. "Helen, can you come to the second floor meeting room in 10 minutes? Thomas." I'd received enough emails from Thomas to know, when he kept it that brief, it was never something pleasant. But I tried to reassure myself. Maybe it was just a meeting, maybe about budget cuts, maybe. When I walked into the room, Thomas was already there, along with a woman from HR whom I didn't recognize. No smile. No invitation to sit. Just a nod and a thin folder placed in front of me. "We've reviewed the organizational structure," Thomas said, his tone not exactly cold, but emotionless, like he was reading a news report, not speaking to a person. "And unfortunately, we'll have to terminate your employment, effective today." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. The sentence, though simple, hit like shattering glass, sudden, cold, and impossible to piece back together. "I don't understand," I said, my voice quieter than I expected. "What did I do wrong?" "It's not a personal matter," the woman beside him quickly chimed in, her voice flat, like reciting a script. "We're restructuring for efficiency. There have been no negative remarks regarding your performance." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. I didn't want to cry. Not in front of them. "I've worked here for 30 years, I whispered. "I'm the last one left from the original team." Thomas looked at me, blinked slightly, but nothing changed in his expression. He simply nodded. "We appreciate your contributions, Helen. The company will honor all benefits. Someone from HR will help you pack your belongings." And that was it. No thank you. No farewell. No hug, no hint of regret. I stood up, feeling like my legs were made of lead. I walked out of the meeting room, down the hallway where a photo of Mr. Rick with the original team once hung, now just a blank white wall. I passed the break room, where the coffee pot I'd brewed that morning still sat full. No one looked up. No one knew what had just happened. Back at my desk, I packed my things into the same tote bag I brought every day. There wasn't much, a few photos, an old notebook, the pair of wool gloves Mr. Rick once gave me. I looked around one last time. The familiar swivel chair. The desk lamp with a small scratch from when my son played with it years ago. No one came to say goodbye. I didn't blame them. I knew people were scared, scared to say the wrong thing, scared to be associated. The warmth had long since faded. Everything was now wrapped tightly in protocol. I walked out of the building, and for the first time I didn't look back. Outside, the sun was still shining as it always did. The street bustled with people. The world hadn't paused, even though I had just lost a part of my life. I sat in the car for a long time, hands on the steering wheel, not starting the engine. In my head, one sentence echoed over and over. I was just fired, after 30 years, without a single thank you. But then something strange happened. Instead of tears, I felt a quiet calm settling in. As if a chapter had closed, suddenly, painfully, but truthfully. No more pretending. No more trying to preserve values that no longer had a place. I didn't know what would come next. But I knew one thing for certain. He had just made a very big mistake. The first few days after leaving the company felt like a nameless void. I still woke up early, out of habit, but didn't know where to go. I still made coffee, still ate a slice of peanut butter toast like I had for the past 30 years. But instead of driving to the office, I sat silently by the window, watching sunlight spill through the curtains. There's a strange feeling when something that shaped your identity is suddenly taken away. I was no longer Ellie, the best coordinator in the company. I was just a woman in her 50s, sitting in a quiet kitchen, with a bag full of office supplies and memories no one else remembered. But I didn't let myself drown in sadness for too long. I began organizing things, papers, notebooks, old contact lists. Things I'd carefully kept over the years now felt like a small treasure trove. In one drawer, I found dozens of business cards, people I'd worked with, people who had once called me to rescue complicated contracts, people who'd written thank you emails, sometimes just because I reminded them of a deadline. I sent a few messages, not expecting much. Just simple check-ins, reaching out to people I once respected and cared for. What happened next surprised me. The first to respond was Mr. Dean, the CEO of a small company that had been a long-time client. He called me the moment he read my message. "Ellie? They actually let you go? What the hell is going on over there?" I smiled gently. "It's all right, Dean. I'm okay." He paused for a moment, then said, "Honestly, if you're thinking of starting something new, just say the word. We still remember how you saved that 2018 contract." Less than a week later, I received 2 more calls, one from a procurement officer at a major partner firm, another from an assistant manager I'd once mentored years ago. They all asked what I was doing, if I had plans yet. One person even said, "I'm sick of what that company's become. If you start something of your own, I'll be the first to sign a contract." I didn't rush. I needed to be sure that I wasn't acting out of pride or bitterness. I didn't need to prove anything to Thomas. I just wanted to do the work I was good at, in the way I believed was right. So I started writing a plan. In my old familiar notebook, tucked between scribbled notes from as far back as 2012, I began to sketch something new. Nothing grand, just a small consulting and contract coordination service for small and mid-sized businesses. The kind of work I'd been doing my whole life, but now it would be mine. I rented a desk in a small co-working space near my home. Every day, I arrived at 8 a.m. sharp, powered up my laptop, made a few calls, rewrote old templates. Everything was slow, simple, but full of heart. I felt alive again. And the most wonderful part? I wasn't alone. People I'd worked with over the years began to reach out. Some emailed to ask for my service rates. Some sent over small contracts just to see if Ellie's still as sharp as ever. And some simply stopped by, gave me a hug, and said, "I'm so glad you're still you." I haven't made a fortune. But I feel richer than I ever have, richer in trust, richer in respect, and most of all, richer in freedom. I no longer have to ask permission to speak my mind. I'm no longer judged by my age or my ability to adapt to a new culture. I get to do the work I love, in the way I believe it should be done. And deep down, I know, this is only the beginning. I didn't keep tabs on the old company every day. I didn't check their website, didn't follow their LinkedIn page. Part of me wanted to keep my peace. Another part felt like that chapter had already closed. But some things, even when you're not looking for them, find their way to you. The first person to mention the company was Lisa, an old friend from accounting. She called me one rainy afternoon, her voice lowered as if afraid someone might overhear. "Ellie, did you hear? They lost a big contract, the one with Landwin, the one you used to manage. The client pulled out after a meeting with Thomas. Said they didn't feel confident anymore." I went quiet. Landwin had been one of our most loyal clients, and I remembered clearly how much they valued clarity, humanity, the very things Thomas never understood. Within weeks, I heard about 3 more former clients who had also cut ties. No public statements. They just quietly walked away, the way polite people do when they'd rather not argue. At the same time, I heard that several core staff members had left. Not just quitting, but moving on to places they had started themselves. One of them, someone I once trained, had launched a small consultancy, just like I had. And I was glad to see him thriving. But the first real twist didn't come from the outside. It came from within. One day, I received an anonymous message from a strange email address. "Thomas is faking numbers to keep investors happy." Attached was a PDF, an internal report with some suspicious edits. I didn't know who had sent it, but clearly, someone inside the company had had enough. I didn't do anything with the information. No expose, no drama. I believed that anything built on falsehood would eventually reveal itself. And then, it happened. One morning in March, the news broke: the company was under internal investigation by an independent audit group. Several revenue reports were suspected of being inaccurate. Investments were frozen. Major projects were suspended. 2 weeks later, I received a phone call from Thomas. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up. Ms. Ellie. He still used that polite tone, but this time, there was something else in it. Urgency. Unease. I think, someone's sabotaging me from the inside. And I believe it might be someone you were once close to. Do you know anything? I stayed silent. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was trying not to laugh. This young man, the same one who'd fired me without a thank you, was now calling to ask if I knew which of the people I'd once mentored was turning against him. I don't know, I replied slowly. But I do know one thing. When you sow dishonesty, you reap suspicion. Thomas was quiet for a while. Then he hung up without another word. I think, in that moment, he understood no one had done anything to him. They simply left. They sought out places where they were respected. It wasn't sabotage. It was the consequence of not listening, of arrogance, of stripping away the very values that had once held the company together. That was the true saboteur, one he never dared to face. By the end of the quarter, the company was officially sold to a larger corporation, partly due to poor management, partly because investor trust had evaporated. The name remained. But the people, the soul of the company, were gone. The old culture was erased. And Thomas, left quietly. No farewell. No one asking where he'd gone. It wasn't a tragic ending. Just an empty one. And I, from a small desk in a shared workspace, simply typed a few more lines into a new project plan. No celebration. No gloating. Just a small, quiet smile. A smile filled with peace. A few months after the old company was sold, my life was more stable than ever. Work was steady, and more former clients kept finding their way to me. I hired a young woman to help with operations, a recent graduate, full of energy. I saw a bit of myself in her. And I did what Mr. Rick once did for me: I believed in her, guided her, and remained patient. Every morning, I still made coffee. No longer in the old break room, no more rattling coffee machines, just a small kettle on the desk and 2 plain white mugs. But to me, that was enough. One early spring afternoon, as I was reorganizing some files, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. I answered, and the voice on the other end made me pause for a second. Ms. Ellie. It's me. Thomas. I was silent for a few seconds. Then replied, softly, I know. He hesitated, then continued. I'm not calling to blame anyone. Not this time. I wanted to ask if I could see you. Would that be okay? I hesitated. A part of me didn't want to meet the person who had cast me aside so unceremoniously. But another part of me understood, sometimes what people need isn't forgiveness, but a chance to face themselves. We met at a small cafe where I often worked on weekends. Thomas walked in, no expensive suit, no cold stare like before. He looked ordinary. Like someone who'd just come through a long winter. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice softer than it used to be. I nodded. I'm always willing to listen, if the other person is sincere. He looked down at his cup, then sighed. I didn't realize how important you were to the company. To everyone. I thought I could do better. Faster. More modern. But I forgot that what held that place together for so long wasn't software or charts, it was people. I didn't say anything. I let him speak it all, like a way of forcing himself to face what he'd done. Maybe, if I had listened to you earlier, things could have turned out differently, he added, his eyes slightly red. You may not believe me, but I really am sorry. I looked at him, without anger, without bitterness. Just with the calm of someone who had already weathered the storm. I believe you, I said. I believe you're sorry. But that doesn't take me back. I've moved on, Thomas. He nodded slowly. I know. I'm not here to ask you to come back, or to help me. I just thought, if there's one person I needed to say this to, it was you. I placed my hand gently on the table. Thank you for saying it. And thank you for being late, just long enough for me to find myself again. We didn't say much more. We just sat there for a while, like two people who once shared a train ride, now standing on different platforms, waving goodbye without resentment. That night, I went home, poured myself a warm cup of tea, and looked out into the backyard. I didn't win a battle. I won by not losing myself. I had been cast aside, but I didn't fall. I had been forgotten, but I never forgot what truly mattered. And because of that, I moved forward, not with bitterness, but with clarity and peace in my heart. Someone once told me, sometimes, losing what you had is the only way to learn humility. Today, I understand that more than ever. And I believe Thomas does too. If you're still listening at this point, I want to thank you. Not just for hearing my story, but because I believe that somewhere in these words, you've seen a part of yourself too. Maybe you've worked somewhere for a long time. You gave quietly, without fanfare, without asking for recognition. Maybe you were pushed aside by those who were younger, faster, more confident. Even if they never truly understood what you built with your whole heart. And maybe, you left. Without a farewell. Without a thank you. What I want to say to you is this. You are not invisible. Your worth doesn't lie in a title or a seat at the table. It lies in how you live, how you treat others, and the things you leave in people's hearts. Whether you're still there or not. Being let go didn't make me smaller. It only clarified something I'd always known. That loyalty, kindness, and lived experience are things no one can take from you, unless you choose to give them away. I didn't rebuild my life to prove anything to anyone. I simply chose not to let someone else write my ending. And if you're in a moment of uncertainty right now, please believe me. Sometimes, being pushed out of one door is the only way to find another. One that's already bathed in light, waiting for you to walk through. As your truest self. Keep walking. With dignity, with faith, and with a heart that never stopped beating for what's good. You are not alone. And you still have so much beauty left to offer this world. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of today's story. I know everyone's time is valuable, and if you've spent over 30 minutes listening to a story about loyalty, being cast aside, and finding the strength to move forward, then maybe, just maybe, you've been through something like this too. If this story spoke to you, let me know. Leave a comment below. How were you underestimated? And what did you do to rise again? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be shared, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next one. My name is Ellie. And I believe that no matter who you are, how old you are, where you work, or if you're starting again from zero, you can still stand strong, grounded in your true worth. See you in the next episode. Take care, and remember, you're not walking alone.